The first notice showed up taped to my front door at 6 in the morning. Bright orange paper. Big black letters. Final warning, eviction proceedings pending. I remember just standing there in my socks, coffee getting cold in my hand, trying to understand how someone could threaten to evict me from the house I was literally standing inside. The house I owned. Not rented. Not leased. Owned. Fully. Legally. Clean title. At that moment, I honestly thought it was a mistake. A bad joke. Maybe someone mixed up addresses. I wish that's all it was. I moved into the neighborhood about 4 years ago. Quiet suburban place. Tree-lined streets, trimmed lawns, kids riding bikes after school. The kind of area where people wave but don't really talk much. That was exactly what I wanted. I worked long hours. When I got home, I just wanted peace. A place where I could sit on my back porch, grill on weekends, and not deal with anyone telling me how to live. The HOA was mentioned during closing, of course. They always are. A stack of papers, some rules about trash cans and noise. Nothing crazy. I skimmed it, signed where my lawyer told me to sign, and moved on. For the first year, everything was fine. No letters, no warnings, no drama. Then she moved in. I didn't know her name at first. Nobody did. She just sort of appeared one week, walking the street with a clipboard, stopping in front of houses, staring, writing things down. At first, I assumed she was with a contractor or something. Maybe insurance. Maybe city inspection. Then she stopped in front of my driveway. She looked at my trash bins, took notes, walked closer to my porch, looked at the flower pots, took more notes. I opened the door and said, "Can I help you?" She didn't jump or apologize. She just looked up, like she'd been waiting for me. "You're aware your bins are visible from the street, right?" she said. No hello. No introduction. I told her, "It's trash day." She sighed. A loud one. The kind meant to make you feel like you're already annoying her. "Well, next time, make sure they're pulled back immediately after pickup. I'll be documenting this." Documenting. That word stuck with me. I asked who she was. She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. More like satisfied. "I'm on the HOA compliance committee." Then she walked away. A week later, I got my first letter. Not a warning. Not a reminder. A violation notice. It listed 3 things. Trash bins visible, 2 long flower pots not uniform in appearance, grass edging, inconsistent with community standards. I laughed when I read it. Actually laughed out loud. The flower pots were clay. Plain. Bought at the same store as half the neighborhood. The grass edging. I had paid a landscaping company to do it 2 months earlier. I figured someone was just being picky. I fixed the trash bin thing just to be safe and tossed the letter in a drawer. Then came the second letter. This one had a fine attached. $50. For repeat violations. I hadn't even received a second warning. I emailed the HOA. Calm. Polite. Explained everything. Asked for clarification. No response. 2 weeks later, another letter. Now the fine was $100. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting. The meeting was held in the clubhouse. Folding chairs. A long table at the front. About a dozen residents sitting quietly, most looking tired or irritated. She was at the table. Clipboard in front of her. Pen tapping. When I sat down, she looked directly at me. Didn't smile. When the meeting opened for homeowner comments, I raised my hand. I explained my situation. Calm voice. No accusations. Just facts. She cut in before I finished. "These violations have been documented multiple times," she said. I asked to see the documentation. She said it wasn't necessary. I asked who decided what community standards meant. She said, "The committee." I asked who was on the committee. She said, "That information isn't relevant." People in the room shifted uncomfortably. A couple of neighbors looked at me with sympathy. One older guy shook his head slowly, like he'd seen this before. The HOA president cleared his throat and said they'd review the matter. Nothing was resolved. After that meeting, things escalated fast. I started getting notices for things I didn't even know could be violations. My porch light was too bright. My car was parked too close to the sidewalk. My mailbox had cosmetic wear. Every notice came with her name at the bottom. I started keeping everything. Letters, envelopes, dates, times. I sent another email, this time with photos attached. Again, no response. Then one afternoon, I came home to find a bright red sticker slapped on my front window. Notice of non-compliance. It was visible from the street. That's when I stopped laughing. That sticker felt personal, like a public shaming, like she wanted everyone driving by to know I was a problem. I peeled it off and found her across the street, standing with 2 other people, pointing at my house. I walked over. I said, "You can't put stickers on my property." She didn't even look embarrassed. "It's standard procedure," she said. I asked under what authority. She smiled again. That same smile. "Failure to comply can lead to eviction." That was the first time she said the word out loud. Eviction. I told her she couldn't evict me. She tilted her head and said, said, "We'll see." That night, I pulled out my closing documents. Deed, title, insurance, everything, all clean. No liens, no shared ownership, no lease agreements. I owned the property outright. I slept fine that night. I really did, because I still believed logic would win. I was wrong. 3 days later, the orange notice appeared on my door. The one that started all of this. Final warning, eviction proceedings pending. No phone call, no hearing, no explanation, just a threat. I stood there longer than I want to admit, reading it over and over, trying to understand how a group of neighbors could think they had the power to remove me from my own home. I folded the notice carefully and put it in my pocket. And for the first time since moving in, I didn't feel calm. I felt targeted. I felt like someone had decided I was a problem they wanted gone. And I had a sinking feeling this was just the beginning. The morning after that eviction notice, I woke up with that heavy feeling in my chest. The kind where you know something isn't right, even before you open your eyes. I didn't rush outside. I didn't check the door. I just lay there for a minute, listening to the quiet hum of the house. The place I worked so hard for. The place that was supposed to be safe. Then I got up and checked my email. There were 3 messages from the HOA, all sent between 11:42 p.m. and 12:06 a.m. The subject lines were almost identical. Urgent compliance failure. Each one listed the same violations, but now they added something new at the bottom. Failure to resolve may result in forced removal from the property. Forced removal. That wording was deliberate, and it rattled me more than I wanted to admit. I decided to do everything by the book. That day, I called the HOA management company listed on the letters. Not the committee. Not her. A third-party office with a real address. After being on hold for nearly half an hour, a woman finally answered. I explained everything calmly. I told her about the notices, the fines, the eviction threat. She paused and said, "That's unusual." I asked if an HOA could actually evict a homeowner. She said, "Generally, no. Not without a court order." That was the first moment I felt a little steadier. She told me she'd look into it and call me back. She never did. Over the next week, things got worse. The fines jumped from hundreds to thousands. Late fees, processing fees, administrative penalties. Every letter had tighter deadlines, shorter windows, less explanation. One notice said I had 10 days to resolve all outstanding compliance issues or vacate the property voluntarily. Vacate. I walked the neighborhood that evening, just to clear my head. That's when I noticed something important. Other houses had the same violations I was being fined for. Trash bins still out. Cars parked the same way. Lights brighter than mine. No stickers. No notices. Just me. I stopped one neighbor, an older woman who'd lived there for years. I asked if she'd ever gotten fined for anything like this. She laughed. Then she stopped laughing when she saw my face. "Oh, you're on her list," she said. I asked what she meant. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Once she decides you're a problem, she doesn't stop." That night, I got a knock on my door. It was her, standing on my porch, clipboard in hand. 2 men behind her I didn't recognize. "I'm here for a compliance inspection," she said. I told her she needed notice. She said she already gave it. I told her she couldn't enter my home. She said, "Refusal will be documented." One of the men took photos of my porch, my door, my windows. I asked who they were. She said, "Associates." I closed the door. My hands were shaking. The next letter arrived 2 days later. This one said my refusal to cooperate was further evidence of non-compliance and would be entered into the eviction record. Eviction record. I started sleeping with my phone on the nightstand. Every sound outside made me tense. I called a local attorney just for advice. He listened quietly and said something that stuck with me. "This sounds less like enforcement and more like intimidation." He told me to keep records. Everything. Photos, emails, letters. I already was. Then came the public humiliation. One afternoon, I came home to find a notice posted on the community bulletin board. My address, my name, listed under residence pending removal. I stood there reading it while other neighbors walked past pretending not to stare. That was the moment I stopped feeling scared. I felt angry, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. I went home, sat at my kitchen table, and laid everything out. Every letter, every email, every fine. And then I pulled out one document I hadn't shown anyone yet. The deed. The one thing she clearly hadn't bothered to look at. That's when I realized something important. She didn't know who she was dealing with. And if you've ever dealt dealt with an HOA like this, subscribe, because this was the moment I stopped playing defense. 2 days later, I got a final notice. Vacate property within 72 hours. No court seal, no judge's signature, just her name. I didn't respond. Instead, I made one phone call. And that's where things started to change. That phone call I made wasn't to a lawyer. Not yet. It was to the county records office. I asked a simple question. The kind that has a very clear answer. Can you confirm who the legal owner of my property is? The woman on the line pulled it up and read my name out loud. Slowly, clearly. Then she added, "You're listed as the sole owner. No liens. No pending actions." I thanked her and hung up. I sat there for a while after that, staring at the wall, letting it sink in. Everything she was doing had no legal foundation, which meant one of two things. She didn't know, or she didn't care. Either way, that was dangerous. The next morning, I stepped outside to find a pickup truck parked across my driveway, blocking me in. No note, no hazard lights, just sitting there. I walked around it and recognized one of the men from the inspection. He was leaning against the truck, arms crossed. "You can't park there," I said. He shrugged. "Temporary." I told him to move it. He said, "I was told to be here." "By who?" He didn't answer. I called the non-emergency police line. Calm. Explained the situation. A few minutes later, the truck moved. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Later that day, an email went out to the entire community. I know because 3 neighbors forwarded it to me. It said I was under investigation for repeated violations and that legal action may be necessary to protect community standards. No details, no context, just enough to make people whisper. That night, someone slipped a note under my door. "Why don't you just leave?" No name. That was the moment I realized this had gone beyond rules. This was about control. The real turning point came 2 days later. I was at work when my phone started buzzing non-stop. Calls, texts, voicemails. A neighbor finally got through. "They're at your house," he said, "with papers, and someone who looks official." I left work immediately. When I pulled onto my street, there were 3 cars parked in front of my house. Her car, a sedan I didn't recognize, and another vehicle with magnetic decals on the door that said, "Community Enforcement." Community Enforcement. That phrase alone made my stomach drop. She was standing on my lawn when I got out of the car. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked annoyed. "You're late," she said. "Late?" I asked what was going on. She held up a stack of papers. "You've been served. You have 24 hours to vacate." I asked who served me. She gestured to the man beside her. He was wearing a plain button-down shirt. No badge. No uniform. "This is an official notice," she said. I asked to see a court order. She said, "It's not required." That was the line. That was the exact moment I knew she'd crossed it. I told her she was trespassing. She laughed. I told her to leave my property. She said, "This isn't your property anymore." Neighbors were gathering now, watching from porches, phones out. I asked her, very clearly, "Who told you that?" She leaned in and said, "The HOA has authority." I asked again for a judge's order. She ignored me and told the man to tape the notice to my door. I stepped in front of him. I said, "Do not touch my house." He hesitated. She snapped, "Do it." That's when I pulled out my phone. I called the police. Not non-emergency. Emergency. I told them someone was impersonating officials and attempting to unlawfully remove me from my home. The operator asked if they were still on the property. I said yes. She told me officers were on the way. For the first time, I saw uncertainty on her face. She tried to backtrack. Said it was just paperwork. Said no one was being forced. I told her she'd already crossed that line. The man with the papers stepped away from my door. Neighbors started murmuring. Someone asked, "Is this even legal?" She snapped at them to mind their business. That didn't help her. While we waited, I went inside and grabbed the folder I'd prepared. Deed, title, tax records, everything. I set it on the hood of my car. When the police arrived, she immediately started talking. Fast, confident, like she'd practiced it. I waited. When the officer finally turned to me, I handed him the folder. I said, "I'm the legal owner of this property. I've never been served by a court, and these people are trying to evict me." The officer looked through the papers carefully. Then he looked at her and asked a question that changed everything. "Ma'am, do you have any legal authority to remove this homeowner?" She didn't answer right away. That silence told me everything. The officer asked her again. She said, "The HOA." He cut her off. "That's not what I asked." Her face went pale. And that's where I'll stop this part. Because what happened next didn't just shock her. It shocked the entire neighborhood. The officer didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten anyone. He just stood there, calm, hands resting on his belt, waiting for an answer. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "The HOA has the authority to enforce community rules," she said. He nodded slowly. slowly. That's not the same as removing someone from their home. She glanced at the man with the papers, like he might rescue her. He didn't. The officer asked for her identification. Then he asked for the other man's. Neither of them liked that. The man admitted he wasn't with any court. He wasn't a process server. He worked for a consulting company that helped HOAs with compliance. The officer raised an eyebrow. Compliance with what? He asked. The man didn't have an answer. I handed over my documents. Deed, title insurance, tax receipts. The officer looked through them carefully, took his time. Then he said something that felt like a weight lifting off my chest. Sir, you are the legal owner of this property. He turned to her. Ma'am, you cannot evict a homeowner without a court order. And you definitely cannot pretend you have one. Her voice sharpened. I never said court. The officer replied, you implied it. And that matters. Neighbors were fully gathered now. No pretending not to look. People were standing in driveways, whispering. One woman asked, so this was all fake? No one answered her. The officer told her to remove the notice from my door immediately. She hesitated. He repeated himself. She tore it down. The man with the papers backed away like he wanted to disappear. The officer warned them both that further attempts to intimidate or misrepresent authority could result in charges. Charges. That word finally made her stop talking. Before leaving, the officer asked me if I wanted to file a formal complaint. I said yes. I told him everything. The notices, the fines, the threats, the fake eviction. He wrote it all down. He also suggested I speak with a real attorney. I already had one in mind. The next morning, I met with a property attorney. I brought the same folder. He didn't even need all of it. By the time I finished explaining, he leaned back in his chair and said, this HOA is in serious trouble. He sent one letter. One. Addressed to the HOA board. Copied to the management company. It outlined everything. The harassment. The false notices. The attempted unlawful eviction. And it ended with one sentence I'll never forget. Cease all contact with my client immediately. The response was immediate. The fines disappeared from my account. The notices stopped. My name vanished from the bulletin board. But she wasn't done yet. She called me. I didn't answer. She emailed. I didn't respond. Then she showed up at my door again. This time, she didn't bring anyone. She looked smaller somehow, less certain. She said, we just want to resolve this amicably. I told her all communication had to go through my attorney. She tried to argue. I closed the door. A week later, the HOA called an emergency meeting. The room was packed. People were angry. Questions were being asked. Loud ones. Who authorized the eviction notices? Why were residents being targeted? Why was money being collected without legal basis? She tried to speak. The board president cut her off. They voted that night to remove her from the compliance committee. She stormed out. Stay till the end, because what happened next shocked everyone. Because losing her position was only the beginning. The meeting didn't end when she walked out. If anything, that's when it really started. People stood up, one after another. Neighbors who had been quiet for years suddenly had stories. Fines that never made sense. Threats that felt personal. Letters that showed up without warning. I sat there listening, realizing this hadn't just been about me. I'd just been the one who didn't back down. Within a week, the HOA board sent out a community-wide email. It was short, careful, written by a lawyer. It said the association was reviewing enforcement procedures, and that certain past actions did not align with proper legal authority. No names mentioned, but everyone knew. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my attorney. He sounded calm, almost pleased. He told me the HOA's insurance provider had been notified, and they were not happy. Turns out, attempting an unlawful eviction and impersonating authority isn't just a bad idea. It's a liability nightmare. The insurance company demanded changes. Immediately. That included removing her entirely from any HOA role. Permanent. She didn't come back. Not to meetings. Not to the neighborhood. Her house went up for sale a month later. The sign sat there for weeks. People whispered, speculated, but no one defended her. The HOA refunded every fine I'd paid, plus interest. They also covered my legal fees. Quietly. No apology letter. Just a check and a note that said, account settled. That was enough for me. The atmosphere in the neighborhood changed after that. People smiled more, talked more. The clipboard patrols stopped. The threatening letters stopped. The HOA still existed, but it felt different, smaller, more careful. They started asking before acting. One evening, a neighbor came by with a plate of cookies. She said, thank you for standing up. Another guy down the street shook my hand and said, we were all scared too. I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt relieved. Now, when I sit on my porch in the evenings, it's quiet again. No stickers, no notices, no threats, just my house, my home, exactly the way it should be. Like, comment, and share if justice was served.